Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leslie from Joleelee Creations, and today we are making the Hey Boo add-on for the Lesiah mini backpack by SewFlo Sewing. This adorable little ghost add-on can be made in a variety of materials, but I'm really loving it in the glow in the dark. It's one of my favorite patterns, and the add-on I made a little over a year ago, and I have been carrying it ever since. It's definitely one of those bags that can be carried all year long, and I can't wait to share it with you. There are quite a few pieces for this bag, but it does come together pretty quick. I'm going to use webbing for my straps, so I have two of those. We need a zipper for our gusset, a zipper for our zipper pocket. I cut an accent piece to go with my slip pocket and an overlay to go with my zipper pocket lining. I have my exterior zipper panel lining. I have my back accent and the foam. I have my handle. I have two connector pieces. I have the gusset bottom lining and the gusset bottom, and I've interfaced those with Decaville Light. I have my ghost front. This is the embroidered version. If you are not doing the embroidery, then you will need a blank front with your two eyes and a mouth, and your lining, and a back piece. And then we will need 4 ghost arms, 2 normal way and 2 mirrored, and then a ghost bottom and a mirrored ghost bottom. For hardware, we'll need 3 zipper pulls, 2 for the gusset zipper and 1 for the zipper pocket. We'll need 2 rectangle rings and 2 sliders and an optional tag. I'm going to show you how I set up the embroidery for my machine. It's by no means the only way that you can do it. It's just what I have found works for me and how I can get consistent results every time. So I've sent my file over to the machine, and I need to mark my center line on my stabilizer. And I'm using a tearaway stabilizer. And I'm just lining up my ruler with the center marks that are on. We want to take our front panel, our ghost front, and we want to take our template and we want to flip it over. And since we're going to be working on the back, we want our pattern piece to be upside down as well. So I'm just going to line up the edges, make sure everything's lined up correctly, and I'm going to mark the center point for embroidery, and I'm going to mark the ends of the crosshair that we have for that center point. Okay, so now you should have this crosshair points on the back side. Take your ruler and line up those crosshairs and draw a line to line that up. Just like that. I'm going to go all the way to the end of our fabric here. Then I'm going to do the same going this way. Line up my crosshair points, and then grab a line on your ruler and line that up there as well. Then we're going to flip over the front piece and take a piece of masking tape. And it doesn't have to be very big. And I fold it back just so I can grab it and peel it off easy. And we're going to use our template here to mark the center point of embroidery on the front. And that's where your needle is going to start your design. So I'm just marking that front crosshair, and it should be on our tape there. So we want to make sure our hoop is oriented in the right way. It's going to go into the machine, and our design is going this way. We want to take our piece, and we're going to line up the crosshairs that we have on the back. So it's going to take a little finagling, and you're really just going to use your sideline marks that we made to center everything up. And it's okay if it takes a little bit. Just going to be about adjusting till we get it right. Once we have it where we want it, I'm going to hold the centerpiece, carefully lift up the edge, and spray some basting spray. That basting spray is going to hold it down for us. So I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to do the same on this side. Carefully lift it up. Make sure everything lines up. And push everything down to secure it to our stabilizer. Okay, so now we're going to insert it into the machine. I want to select my design, and I want to move that needle to the center point. So I'm just coming over to the dot that we made, and just making sure my needle drops right on that little dot, because sometimes the embroidery machine doesn't line up directly on center to your hoop. So once I have my needle right on the center point for the design, remove your tape, and we're going to go ahead and start the embroidery. So this file is designed to do the applique one of two ways. One way is to pre-cut out your eyes and your mouth from our template. You can cut that out and then just double-sided tape that right onto our stitch line that we just put in. And then we're going to put it back into the machine and resume our stitches. The first eye is finished, so we're going to move on to the second eye and start that placement stitch. So now we're going to remove the hoop, and I'll show you the second way to add the eye. We're just going to add some double-sided tape right onto our main body. Remove that, and just add a square big enough to cover the placement stitch. Stick that back into our machine and run the next stitch. Remove it from the hoop, and we want to take our scissors, cut away the excess fabric. So we're going to want to get as close as we can to those stitches, which is kind of why I find the other method easier if you can, to just cut out the circle beforehand. Then you don't have to do this step at all. So once you have everything cleaned up on the outside of that stitch line, we're going to put it back in the machine and finish stitching. Clean up any loose threads and remove your ghost face from your frame, and the front is complete. For cutting out the eyes and mouth by hand, I recommend printing out the pieces on cardstock and then tracing it onto a piece of vinyl and cutting it by hand with scissors. So you're going to want to keep your hand and the scissors in one spot and move the fabric. That's going to help get a smoother finish around the edges as we go around. And we're just staying on the outside of the line that we drew. So keeping your scissors steady, you're just turning the fabric as we go around to get a smoother finish. Take a look at it from the front, clean up any little noticeable flaws. And now I like to take a lighter and go around the edges from the bottom side, and that's going to get rid of any of the fuzzies that are sticking out and shape it up just a tiny bit better. Sometimes the fuzzies sticking out are what we see. If you're using a thicker vinyl, you may want to edge paint. If you are going to be stitching your eyes on with your sewing machine, we want to carefully take our template piece and trace the placement marks for the eyes and mouth onto your front body. I really like to use the roller chalk pencil for this because you can kind of go over it a few times to really get the marks to show up, especially on the white. And so you can see our placement marks there. I'm going to add double-sided tape to the back side of the eyes and mouth. I usually like to add 2 pieces and I just keep it out of the seam allowance. We're going to top stitch these on at 1/8 of an inch, so just about 1/8 of an inch from the edges. But I do like to have a pretty good amount of tape on it just so that it doesn't shift or move and I don't have to worry about it. So we're going to peel the back of that tape off and place that right onto our placement marks, lining up our edges. And now we'll do the same for the eyes. And if you need to edge paint your fabric, then you want to do that before this step and let it completely dry. Add that eye. I'm going to do the same for this one. I'm not going to backstitch on these. I'm going to pull my thread tails long and line up the edge of my foot. And I like to top stitch these at a 1 just because it's a little bit easier with the curves to go around. And if you're uncomfortable with your machine, you can hand crank it around these circles, or you can just go stitch by stitch. You start to notice your fabric bunching up, raise your foot. Sometimes just the pressure of the foot can make the fabric bunch up underneath. Pull these threads to the back. And walk that last stitch into the same hole we started in. Pull our thread tails long, and then I'll move on to the next eye. Finish pulling our thread tails to the back. And we'll tie these off. And I like to add a tiny bit of tape on the back side just to hold those threads to keep them from coming undone. We are now working with the ghost arms, and I have sprayed them with basting spray, and this really helps just get them tacky enough so that they can stay together and not shift when I'm stitching them together. So I'm just placing them wrong sides together, lining up my edges. Same thing for this arm. A mirrored piece and a regular piece go together, lining up the edges. And the same thing for the ghost bottom. And then I like to just roll everything and press it together really good. And now we want to top stitch these at 1/8 of an inch. Now I'll take my little scissors and I'll clean up anything that's not even, or if it's sticking out, and just kind of slightly clean up those edges. You want it to look neat, especially if you're going to edge paint too. It'll make it a lot easier. So I'm just evening everything up. And just like we did with the eyes, go ahead and clean up any of the little itty bitty fuzzies that are sticking out. Especially if you're edge painting, it'll just make it a lot smoother. And then edge paint those pieces if you prefer. Use your pattern piece to mark your arms and your bottom placement. And we're going to place them onto the body. So that way when we stitch them, so they're going to normally look like this when it's assembled. But because we need to assemble it still, we're going to face them in on the body. And the same with the ghost bottom. So I have the smaller side on the left, and we're going to flip it up and align it on the bottom. Clip these on. And we want to baste them in place. Now we're going to set our front panel aside and we're going to work with our handle and connectors. So for our handle, just going to draw a line down the middle. And the same for our connectors. And because this vinyl, it has the soft back and it does have a tiny bit of stretch to it, I am going to add a little bit of support right down the middle just to help keep it from stretching or pulling out. The handle I think should be okay because we fold that over a couple times. So I'm just going to add the double-sided tape. About an 1/8 inch on each side of the center line. Fold these to the center. And then another strip of double-sided tape and fold it in half again. And we're going to top stitch along the edge of the handle. And if you like the looks of it, you can add another stitch line right down next to your first set of stitches. I know the white's a little hard to see, the white on white, but we have 2 rows of stitching on each side. And now for the handles, we're just going to go down, or for the connectors, we're just going to go down on each side. Now we need our back strip, our handle, our back strip foam, and our straps. Take your back strip and draw a line down the middle, just like we did for our straps and handle. And then we want to mark a little mark 1/2 inch from each edge. And we want to take our foam and center it on that line. And I like to redraw the center line on the foam as well. And we need to mark our centers. Using the pattern instructions, we're going to, on the right side, make a mark on each side of that center line. And we want to grab our handle and we're going to arch it around, lining up the edge with those marks that we just drew. and we want to baste that in place. Bring your handle around so it's not twisted. Line it up on that mark and baste that in place. Grab your straps and we want to line them up right next to our handle. And clip that in place. And we want to baste our straps on right next to our handle. Don't worry if this gets a little bit out of shape or kind of bent up. It'll fix itself in the next step, but we just more or less want to make sure these straps are straight. Okay, so now we have our straps, our handle. We need to flip over to the back side, and we want to bring this piece to meet that center line. So I'm going to grab some double-sided tape, and you may need a thicker double-sided tape here or 2 strips just because it's a little thick. So I'm going to straighten this out as much as I can as I put this double-sided tape on. And while I'm here, I'm going to do it on the other side of the line as well. Remove this tape if I can get it to stick to the foam. And match this raw edge to our line. And then do the same for this side. Remove our tape. And bring this up to match the line. And you may have to add a couple clips to keep that in place. So now we have our handle, our back strip piece. Make sure everything's lined up. So your handle, back strip, and straps. Using measurements in the pattern on the back panel, I have marks across the top of the back panel and mark my center. I'm going to add double-sided tape along that area. And to make our straps a little more manageable, we can roll them up and kind of wrap them to keep them out of the way while we're assembling the bag. So we have some of the bound from Weft and Warp, and it's just kind of like sticks to itself. So just wrap it a few times, and then now we can keep that out of the way. So do the same for the strap. Just rolling to get it up out of the way. And then wrap it up. Now we'll peel off this double-sided tape. And line up our strap with the center mark and the line that we drew. Let me see if I can mark that center a little bit better here for me. And now we want to top stitch across the top and the bottom of our accent piece. Now let's trim off this excess that's on the outside of the panel. And we can add a double row of stitching for security. Okay, we want to grab our connectors and our rectangle rings, slide them on, and we want to baste the ends together. And the seam is going to be along the seam of our bottom of our buckle so that raw edge is hiding. And we want to place them on the table in front of us. Grab your ruler and we're going to mark on the side of our connectors. One on the right side and one on the left side. In the pattern, she gave us a couple measurements. So we want to line up the mark that we made and the corner of our connector so it's at an angle. And we're going to clip that in place. And the same for this side. Line up the mark on the side of our connector with the mark that she had given us in the pattern. Line that up with the corner of the connector. clip in place, and now we want to baste those on. Trim off any excess that's sticking out past the main body. Grab your ghost front and your ghost back, and we're going to line them up right sides together. Clip everything in place. And we want to stitch that together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to flip it open, and because I have the ghost bottom on here, I'm only going to top stitch on the back side. So I'm going to fold everything back towards the bottom. So I'm going to fold it, the seam allowance, back towards the back and top stitch on the back side on the underneath of the butt flap. So we have just top stitched on the underside, the back panel of our ghost bottom. Okay, let's set that aside and we're going to work with our zipper gusset. So we are going to lay these straight side to the center because that's the side that we are going to want to attach to our zipper. So you'd want to make sure that it's flat edge instead of going to this little slight curve. So we're going to center this up, align this onto our zipper, and we're going to baste that in place. Now we're going to take a lining panel and we're going to sandwich that, so we got the straight edge with the straight edge. Line this up, clip it into place. And now we're going to sew this together. You need to fold this open. Pushing both sides together. Couple clips. And now we'll top stitch that onto the zipper. So we have one side of our zipper panel. We need to repeat everything for the other side, making sure we're matching up the edge. And baste that into place. Even though I told you guys not to do that, I still flipped it around somehow and sewed on the angled side. So we don't want to do that. We just unpick this. Okay, so straight side to the zipper. So make sure you don't get turned around if you flip your zipper over. Straight side, line it up, baste it on. Alright, now we need to add our lining. So we have the flat side here, this way. Line it up. And stitch everything together. Alright, so let's top stitch this. And now I want to baste these raw edges closed. Okay, now we want to add our zipper pulls, but we want to make sure that our panels are even. And mine are a little bit off, so I need to bring this side up higher. Let's cut this off here. I'm going to add one zipper pull first. I'm going to put it in a few teeth. Oops. And I'm going to try and get this to slide on. There we go. And see, there we go. See if I can get that zipper to adjust. And looks like I still need to bring it a little bit more up. I guess it's a little too high now, right? Yeah. So bring it back down a little bit. And then that looks about even, just a tad off, but I think we can get that to smooth itself out. So I'm going to trim my zipper so that it's even. Slide one pull on this side. One pull on this side. Oops. Then flip it over on this end. Even up our zipper teeth. And meet those in the middle. Make sure everything lines up well. Then we need to add our zipper gusset panel. So we're going to right sides together. Line this up across the bottom. And depending on your zipper width or your seam allowance that you used, it could be a little bit off, but that's okay. I've done it many times and it has worked out in the end. We just want to make sure everything is centered and even. Same for this side. So we're going right sides together with the lining and sandwiching this on the other side. So this side lined up pretty good. So I think the other side was just a little bit of error when I stitched my zipper on with the seam allowance. But like I said, I've made this bag a lot and it all works out. We just want to make sure it's all center. And stitch that on with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I stitched that with my basting stitch, so I'm going to stitch over it one more time. Same thing with this side. Trim off any excess zipper tape. Now we need to fold these back, wrong sides together, and top stitch on. Now I want to baste this raw edge. I'm doing it from the bottom just so I can make sure that I catch everything. Okay, so on this side of the zipper, you can see that I kind of pinched the bottom of the zipper here, or I didn't pull it apart far enough. It could be multiple reasons where this just top stitching didn't pull apart, and so it brought these ends smaller on the gusset side, the zipper panel side. So I'm going to leave it so I can walk you through how to fix it when we get there, when assembling, because it's happened to me a few times. So like you can see, this side's much better. It lines up pretty even. So what I'm going to do to make it easier when we're stitching it together is I'm just going to angle that in so that it's flush. So anything that's sticking out, I just want to slightly angle. And this side's going to be a bit more of an angle, but we'll make it work, okay? So I'm just coming right in here, and I'm just going to snip off that part so it has a little bit more of an angle. To there. So that way we don't have this big gap right here. So I'm just smoothing that off, and then we'll be able to work that into the gusset when we add this to the main body. Okay, so I'm going to work with my slip pocket now, and I'm going to do it a little bit different because I want to be able to add a tag. Since we have the ghost front face, it doesn't really give us a good opportunity for a tag. So I'm going to do it with an accent piece. I'm just going to fold this in half, and I'm going to stitch up the sides. So I'm just going to trim these corners for the bulk. And turn inside out. And push our pocket down. Going to grab my ruler. Draw a line a ½ inch down from the top. And add double-sided tape. Going to baste this top close to help me line up everything a little bit better. Remove my double-sided tape, and I do have a little bit extra of this accent, so I don't know what I measured. Going to line that up on the line. Peel off this double-sided tape. And carefully fold this over to the back side. So the shorter side will be on the front, so you can see this back side is a little bit lower. And that'll allow us to top stitch twice and make sure we don't drop off the back side. And trim off any excess. And there we have our pocket. So I decided that because I'm using a name tag and I don't really have anything cute, and the way the white and the white kind of went on there, I'm actually going to stick it under the side of my slip pocket right here. But if you had a cute tag, or if I was using a black tag, I may would stick it under here. But I think I'll like it a little bit better kind of hiding in this area on the side here. So I'm going to do that, and then I want to split my pocket. But I think because the pocket's a little bit small, I want my phone to be able to fit. So I'm going to divide it right here. And that way, so it's about 2.5 inches, maybe 2 3/4 on that side, on the small side. That way you can fit something small, but you'll also be able to fit your phone in that pocket. So for slip pockets, I like to tape them down, but what I'm going to do is before I change my thread for the black for my zipper pocket on the other side, I'm going to just stitch the top down on this white in white, and then I can switch to my black thread. So it's just going to be a couple stitches on the white area. Okay, so now I have my black thread. I can just stitch down starting right on the black area, just under the white stitching. So there we have our slip pocket. Just remove our chalk line. Okay, we're going to be working with our other lining panel. Our zipper pocket, I'm going to do an overlay. I have my 2 zipper linings. I have my zipper and I have my zipper tape. So I need to mark the centers of my bag. So I have that. And grab my chalk. And I'm just going to mark a center line there. Then I need to go about 4.5 inches down for the top of my overlay. So it's going to be right about the top of that line. Oops. Good thing about chalk. Okay. So about 4.5 inches down. Is that right? Yep. Okay. 4.5 inches down. Remove the backing from, or the tape from my overlay. I'm going to center it on that line that we just drew. This is a 6-inch overlay, so I know my center point needs to be right at 3 inches. And that looks good. So I'm going to stitch around the entire perimeter of my overlay, pulling my thread tails long so I could tie them off on the back. Pull my threads to the back before I come back around. Pull my thread tails to the back and tie off all 4. So there we have our overlay. We need to cut out the window behind it. So I'm going to cut down the center. And carefully remove everything behind that overlay. Kind of use that tape as your guide. Grab our zipper lining. I'm going to lay it right side up with my zipper tape right side up. And I'm going to stitch this on at an 1/8 inch. Flip our zipper tape up. Push our seam allowance down. Grab our other lining panel right side up. And with our zipper tape right side up, we're going to line everything up. And stitch that down at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And now we need to add our pull. So I want it to close on the left side, so I'm starting it on the right. And slide it on. Crease this down best we can. Double-sided tape along the bottom right on top of that stitching. And along the top, right on top of that stitching. We want to remove the backing for our tape. Clear the zipper pulls out of the way. Grab your overlay, and we're going to center the pocket on our zipper tape. Line up the teeth to the center of the opening and press down. Flip up our lining panel. We're going to push this down again. This waterproof canvas is being stubborn. Pull back. The backing on the double-sided tape. You want to carefully push the overlay down onto the zipper tape. I'm just kind of using my thumb on the underside to hold that ledge that was kind of popping up. And so we just want to make sure the teeth are lined up in the center of our overlay box. Grab your lining, your zipper lining panels, and we want them to be facing the top. So they're going to be sticking out. And I'm going to stitch the bottom of this overlay window at an 1/8 inch. Just at the bottom. So I'm going to pull my thread tails out long, so I have room to tie them. Thread tails out long, flip over, and let's tie these off on the back side. So if your pocket linings are not facing up, you probably stitched through your lining and closed your pocket. So we want to make sure that those are flipped up before you made that stitch. So double check now before you get too far. Make sure you didn't stitch your pocket closed. Same on this side. Okay, now flip your pocket linings back down. Going to crease that so your zipper should be open. That back down. Flip this back over, and we're going to start in this last stitch where we stopped. Pull our thread tails long, and we're going to stitch the rest of the way around the box, ending in our first stitch. Thread tails long, flip it over, pull it all to the back, and tie it off. And I'm going to trim this bottom lining to match the other lining piece. Flip it over right side up. Zipper lining pockets towards the bottom. We're going to carefully flip back the lining and we're going to stitch that pocket closed. So about 1/4 inch, you get right in there and stitch the pocket closed. Trim off any excess zipper tape on both sides. So there is our zipper pocket. We want to grab our other lining panel with our slip pocket. They're going to go right sides together. Clip it together if you need to. And then we're going to stitch across the bottom at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Fold open your bottom seam. And we want to press the seam allowance open to each side. So push that flat, and now we want to top stitch on each side of that bottom seam, keeping the seam allowance back to their respective sides. So now our lining piece is one panel with our zipper on one end and our slip pocket on the other. We want to grab our exterior panels and we're going to match up the lining panel with the exterior. The zipper pocket is going to go on the back side, and the slip pocket is going to go on the front. So we're going to line up the centers and the top. Grab quite a few clips. We're going to line up the center seam first. On both sides. Try and keep everything as flat as you can. Pull everything to the edge. And the same for this side. So we're just going to keep working our way around. Keeping everything as flat as we can. We're going to baste everything around the edges. Be mindful of the handle. We want to flip that back. And our little flap here for the bottom, we want to pull that back when we baste so that we can go around that. So I'm just going to pull the little arm or the wing out of the way. So there we have our main body basted together. I'm going to slide the zipper over to the center to keep that out of the way. Okay, grab your gusset, and I would like to mark the center. It seems to really help. The bottom center on both sides. And then I'm going to line up the seams on the sides here. I want to find the top center. Let's just put a small mark there. On both sides. This doesn't want to write on that, so we'll just do a small little snip. And a small snip. Okay. Good. So we're going to line up this gusset seam, and we're going to go flip this over and go right sides together. So I want this to be face down, and I want that to line up right on my seam. And I don't want this to shift. So I'm going to grab my tiny stapler. Yeah. Line that up. I'm going to add a tiny staple right in the seam allowance. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to line it up right on the seam. And I'm going to add a tiny staple. That way, that holds everything into place and we don't have to worry about that slipping. So my straps are going to go on the inside. My handle's going to come down, and I want to line up that center point with my center point here. And the same thing, I don't want this point to change. I know the centers are going to match up. So I'm going to add a staple here. This side's coming out. Didn't catch that one all the way, so I'll add another one, and we want to make sure this little butt wing is out of the way. So I'm just matching all the center points with the center points on my gusset first. And I'm adding a staple into those areas. And if you don't want to add staples all the way around your whole bag, that's completely fine. But I do recommend doing it for those key points to keep everything where they need to go. Now we can continue on clipping or stapling all the way around. I have some troubles with the bottoms sometimes slipping out, especially in the thick areas. So I'm just going to staple the gusset part. And I'm not going to, I don't think I need to staple all the way up around the top. So again, just this gusset area. Because that tends to slip out the most. So I'm just stapling around the gusset as we go. Just doing my best to keep it out of the seam allowance. Like I said, even if you don't want to staple around your whole bag, I get it. Staples can be intimidating and a pain to pull out, but there's nothing really worse than having to like go around your gusset a whole bunch. Okay, so looking inside the bag, we have that flap on the bottom. I'm going to put a clip that's different than all the others right there so I know to check to make sure that I'm not stitching through that little flap. One more little staple right here, I think, for this gusset. And then I'm going to baste around the entire bag at an 1/8 inch seam allowance just to hold everything in place. Okay, so now we need to add our binding, and let's just trim up some of these loose threads so they don't hang out the bottom. And we want to trim off any areas that are sticking out further than one another. So we just want everything to be flush. So if anything shifted just a little bit, we want it to be even. So go ahead and check over everything and trim those areas that are thicker off. And then you can also check to make sure all of your staples are out. Left a couple up here. Just going to grab these out real quick. So we don't want to bind staples into our bag. Thought I got this side, but I guess not. So the peel and stick binding is pretty easy. We are just going to start at the bottom seam and pinch around as we go. When we get to the corners, I'm going to pinch and crease it back. So there's a little fold on the inside. We're just working our way all the way around the bag. And occasionally adding a couple clips. Okay, so we have our binding on, and I just want to add this clip that's different from the others down here to make sure that I don't catch that in the bottom. Check inside and make sure we caught everything, especially on the arms and connectors. We just want to make sure that we can't see any of the basting stitches. So I just like to check those before I turn it out. So you can kind of see, let's see if I can, on this arm here, you can kind of see stitching here. So we just need to come a little closer. So I'm just going to put a clip there so we can come back to that. The arm looks okay. To do this connector a little bit closer. That connector looks pretty good. Here looks good. This one looks good. So just these two little areas, we just need to come in a little tighter. Now, optional step for binding that I like to do is I'll start at the beginning, and I should have one side that's pretty close to the stitching and another that's not, but I will start at the end and just cut as close to that stitch line as I can, and then that way it'll really help pop out that stitching. I highly recommend using a blow dryer to turn this one out, especially if you are using glow-in-the-dark vinyl and Decaville light. It's a super soft vinyl and heavy Decaville light, so it just works a little bit better if you can warm it up, and then you don't get any those creases on your front panel. So there we have our little ghosty guy. And we just need to finish our straps. Okay, to add our straps, we want to make sure everything is straight. Going to slide on our slider first. I'm going to pull that up through. Grab your rectangle ring, making sure everything is straight. We're going to come in from the outside through the rectangle ring, come back up to our slider, go up on the inside of the slider, and back down on the other side. So you can kind of pull this through a little bit. You'll need a little bit of room on the inside here so we can stitch that together. So there we have one strap. We'll do the same to this side, so make sure that everything is straight. We're going to slide it up through the top, down through the bottom, come around the outside and in, pull this up, so we can go up through and back down. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the Hey Boo add-on for the Lesiah Mini Backpack by SewFlo Sewing. I really hope you enjoy this add-on and the tutorial. Please like the video if you learned something today. Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts on this bag. I'd also love to see you in my Facebook group, Creating with Joleelee. Until next time, bye!